All right.
All right.
Welcome to Remix Your Marriage. This is Lyndan,
And Vanessa.
and thank you for joining us. If you did not hear Brown Skin Girl, please listen to that episode right after this one or even right before, because I won't mind.
Would you mind if I added something to my story, even though this is about you, but I always like to make it about me somehow?
You know, that kind of tracks with marriage. Go ahead.
Listening to the last episode, it was hard for me because I haven't been that honest and truthful about my life out in public. But I really want to just add that, again, my parents did the best they could with what they knew. And one of the things that which is so strange to say after everything I shared, I really had a fun childhood, a happy childhood. My mom and dad made sure I was in dance all day. They didn't put me in, not that there's anything wrong with daycare, but they wanted to make sure I was dancing. I was moving, so I was in dance all day long. My brother was in sports. We went to Dodger games once a month. We went, on vacation. I went to Guatemala. So I just wanted to add that. It just make me feel good.
Yes.
All right. That's it. This is all about my love and his background.
Well, right on. So let's just get right into it.
Yeah,
So
let's go.
I was born in 1973. Born and raised on the playground is where I spent most of my days.
You can't help
I
it.
can't help it.
I know.
So in 1973, I was born in Riverside, California. I grew up without a father, and unfortunately, that is a very common Black story.
Mm.
And in my case, I didn't know any different. I was told that when I was 3 years old, so my mother and father, who were not married, I later found out were never married, but they were living together with my three older siblings from a different father. And my dad wasn't the kindest man to those kids, my siblings, or to my mother. And when I was 3 years old, he pushed my mother, which is the story that I was told. But in reality, I believe that he hit her and more. So the day that that happened, I should say one of the days that happened, my grandfather came by and brought his pistol. My grandfather's old school Black man, and came by and brought his pistol and pointed it at my dad, at his head, and said, "I don't care what you do to that one," which is pointing to me, "but if you ever put your hands on my daughter or those other three, I will kill you." So my dad took that and packed his bags, and he left when I was 3 years old.
And right there, starting your life. I don't care what you do to this one, but these three. I mean, what that must have done to you.
Yeah. Well, and obviously not understanding that when I was 3, but hearing that story
later on.
I will tell you a quick story that I grew up thinking was funny, and later on learned that it was super traumatic to my siblings. Around that, before that time, apparently I was sitting eating dinner with everyone.
Would you mind if I interrupted real quick?
Oh, go ahead.
So this is the P story?
This is the P story.
Because when we first met, we were just telling each other funny stories, talking on the phone, and you'd been telling this story forever. And I laughed so hard because I thought it was so funny. And we just ended up bringing it up again.
Yeah, so we'll get there.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
Anyhow, I was at the table eating at 2.5, 3 years old, and there were peas. I was eating peas. And I believe in my little brain, I was like, this pea is the exact size of my nostril. I wonder if it will fit. So I picked that pea up and I stuffed it in my nose. And apparently they had the hardest time getting that pea out of my nose. It got very dangerous because they couldn't push too hard because it would smash the pea. And, so they talked about that story for years, and I always thought it was funny. But as Vanessa just mentioned, one time we brought it up again, and we learned that that was a very traumatic time for my older siblings. And
well, when we brought it up at Thanksgiving, I don't know how many years ago, I think I brought it up, and I go, yeah, Lyndon told me one time he got a pea stuck in his nose, and as soon as I said it, everybody kind of froze.
Yeah.
And that's when we started the story started to
come out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, I guess that was kind of a turning point with how.
So that was the night, wasn't it?
I don't know if that was the same night that he left, but that was.
But what happened? What really happened with the pea story?
Well, all I know is that was a turning point to how mean he was to my older siblings. So it was very traumatic to them, so much so that during Thanksgiving, I think during Thanksgiving, you're supposed to talk about religion and politics, right? But instead, we brought up the past and didn't go well. And again, they didn't want to get into detail about exactly what happened with the peace story,
Mhm.
but it wasn't. But it wasn't good. If it was physically abusive, but I definitely know it was verbally abusive too. My siblings and to my mom because he blamed them for not watching me.
Mhm.
When who could have stopped me from shoving a pea in my
Yeah.
nose? Nobody knew what I was going to do.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of the end for him. And I think shortly after that is when he ended up pushing my mom or hitting my mom, and my grandfather came over. So that was early on in my life. Fast forward to 3 years later, when I was 6 years old, he ended up calling. So I hadn't seen this man, talked to this
Mhm.
man, didn't know life with this man. He called my mom when I was 6 years old, and they were talking. And my mother casually calls me into the room and says, "Hey, your dad's on the phone." And I go, "Okay." And she's like, "He wants to speak to you." And I go, "Okay." Well, I'm 6 years old. I'm like, "Okay."
Mhm.
So I remember him saying, "Hi, son. This is your dad. Do you want me to come see you?" And I said, "No," because I didn't tell him why, but the reason I said no is because I don't know you.
Mhm.
You're a stranger calling my mom asking to come see me. I don't know you, so no, I don't want to come see you. So my dad took that from a 6 year old, and I never saw him again, never heard from him again. I grew up with a single mother after that. I was growing up with a single mother, three older siblings who are all my half brother and half sisters. That wasn't so much a term back then
Mhm.
because so many minority families had different fathers. It was just, and it's probably the same now, but back in the 70s and 80s, it seemed a lot more common. My siblings' father was an incredible man who I love very much. He passed away not too long ago, shortly after my mother passed away, but this man offered to step in and to be my father and included me in everything that he did with his kids.
Mhm.
And for some reason, at no fault of his, I just never felt like I fit in. He told me, "You can call me dad." And, whenever he called to talk to his kids, he would talk to me as well. And I just would entertain the thought of it, but I just
You
never
didn't feel
really,
connected.
no, just,
Mhm.
it makes no sense because he isn't, I mean,
Mhm.
you got,
Yeah,
you got to
great
spend time,
man.
just an
Great,
incredible,
sweet, loving man.
yeah, but just not my father, you
Mhm.
know? So as I grew up in Riverside, we didn't have a lot of money.
Mhm.
So we had government
Mhm.
assistance. So, government assistance, for those that don't know, you're lucky. But the government in the 70s and early 80s, they would give you cheese, they would give you bread and things like that for free. And because my grandfather was in the military, he had government assistance on base. So we would get these humongous blocks of cheese,
Mhm.
but this cheese did not melt. It's
So it must have not been real cheese.
I think that was just a name that they called it because it was yellow. Because it did not melt. I would burn bread trying to melt this
Oh my
cheese,
gosh.
and I would open the sandwich and the cheese was still cold.
Mm.
On top of that, we would get government bread where half of it was soggy and the other half was hard as a rock. And then we'd get powdered milk.
Mhm.
And powdered milk just tastes like water with powder in it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I was growing up at that time, not having a lot and quickly learning how much I hate chocolate. And sometimes I would force myself to eat chocolate if it was around just so I'd have something to eat.
Mhm.
So without trying to make my family or my mom look bad, my siblings, my brother's 10 years older than me, my other sister's 9 years older than me, my other sister is 7 years older than me. So,
Mhm.
when I'm 8, 9 years old, they're already teenagers. They're concerned with their self. And of course,
Weren't they all
they
working too?
they were working.
Mhm.
The younger sister had a baby early, so she had her own concerns and things that she had
Mhm.
to take care of. So I was kind of I was kind of neglected in a way, but I don't think they really noticed that I was being
Mhm.
neglected because they were around me,
Yeah.
in the evenings. But I would come home to an empty house and really only had television
Mhm.
to help me learn about things, learn about fatherhood and how men and how women work and things like that.
Mhm.
I mean, I was grateful for my uncle and my grandparents that helped us out, but kind of rewinding a little bit, I never really felt like my grandparents liked me.
Mm-hmm.
So they helped us out a lot and they got me Christmas presents along with everyone else. But as far as the loving side of it, I never really felt that the way that I felt like they loved my cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that was because of my father's situation. They
Yeah.
never liked him from the beginning.
Isn't that interesting though? You were little, you didn't really, you didn't know what had happened when you were little. The difference between your family, my family talks too much, and your family
Yeah.
wasn't telling you, and they were trying to protect you.
Yeah.
And I understand that, but you felt a disconnect with your grandparents, even though nothing was said. You
Yeah.
could feel that at a
Yeah.
young age, you know.
And that was back when you got spankings and,
Mm-hmm.
there were, I wish we had time out back then. I would have taken time out a billion times over the spankings that I would get for little things. But, as you mentioned with your family, that's what they knew.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather grew up getting spanked. My grandmother, that's what they knew. So
Yeah.
I felt like sometimes with me it was spankings to another level.
Mm-hmm. Do you
So
want to just go over that or no? What kind of spankings you would get were a little bit different.
yeah, but out of respect for my grandfather, I will not
Okay.
get into detail.
Okay.
But we later on reconciled something that he didn't even know needed to be reconciled. But remind me to touch on that later.
Okay.
So as time went on, I discovered a show called Different Strokes.
Hmm.
And Different Strokes was, if you don't know, was a show that came out in 1978. And it was about two black kids from Harlem who their mother was the maid for this white man. And she died. And the white man decided to take them in and move them up to, where were they? Were they in Manhattan? Up,
East, no,
upper
yeah, Upper East Side.
Upper East Side?
Upper East Side, yeah.
Yeah.
Was it the
So
same place the Jeffersons lived?
maybe, maybe it is. Um,
And they
so
were from Harlem.
they were from Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they were from Harlem, which, when you're a kid, I thought Harlem was a different planet, but
Mm-hmm.
there were these poor black kids from Harlem. They move up to be with Mr. Drummond and the Upper East Side, and then now they're rich, and I connected with them because, first of all, this was the first time that I saw kids that looked like me on TV
Mm-hmm.
who were not poor, who were not ignorant, and who were living a good life. I mean, prior to that, I was watching Good Times where everybody was broke and they were in the
Mm-hmm.
projects, and every episode was about them getting out of the projects and getting fired. And so that's what I knew for
Yeah.
black people. That was my future. My future
Wow.
was living in the projects,
Mm.
going to visit my kids every now and then because I wasn't going to be a good father. And then Different Strokes come. So I start to see like, oh, so there's a possibility for me because look at these black kids living, in New York and the Upper East Side and going to this all white school. And, you know, we were we were brainwashed at that time to think that white was right.
Mm-hmm.
That's, the first part of my life. Like anything that a white person did was what you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And to come close to success, you had to follow what they did.
Mhm.
And then watching Different Strokes, it was a white man that would took these black kids in, and he was the savior.
Saved them.
Yeah, so I wanted to be like him. But, there was no one on TV like me, a father, so I wanted to be like him, and that gave me my first taste of what I wanted to be as a dad.
Yeah.
So when I was 10 years old, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I remember I climbed this tree that was in my front yard, and I was sitting at the top of the tree, and I'm 10 years old, and I'm on this branch, and my legs are just dangling, and I'm looking down, and no one knows I'm up there. And I got this thought in my head that said, you know what? You're going to be the best father
Mm-hmm.
because you know everything that you don't have right now.
You made me cry. I don't know this story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You can't cry because you're going to make me
I
cry.
know. I'm sorry.
Um, but I realized at 10 years old, like, I'm going to be a good father. But until then, I'm going to you can't cry.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. I'm not going to look at you.
okay.
Go
But
ahead.
until then,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give my father the benefit of the doubt because I'm 10 years old and I don't know what it's like to be a 28-year-old man with children who has a gun pointed at his head.
Yeah.
So until I'm in his position, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Wow.
So,
That is so wise for a 10-year-old to even think that.
and I don't know where that came from. Well,
Yeah.
that came from God.
Mm-hmm.
So that was me, you know. So getting closer to moving to Santa Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
So at 12 years old, I started in junior high. My mom had us all go to a school that was out of our district. That district that I went to school in was the district for where my grandparents lived. And she did that because she worked, left the house at 5 o'clock in the morning, didn't get home till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. She
Wow.
was a single mom. She was a secretary. She was trying to work her way up
Mm-hmm.
to take care of her family so she didn't have to depend on my uncle and didn't have to depend on my grandparents. She really wanted to do it on her own. So she commuted every day, 2 hours there, 2 hours back, and worked an 8 hour day. So, in her thought was if something happens in school, my grandparents are right there so they can come get me. So, great idea. Horrible for me
Yeah.
because all the kids that I went to school with in elementary school, once I moved over to junior high, I didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
So it was like starting all over again. And as a 12-year-old boy, it's hard to start over again, you know.
Yeah.
And fortunately, this was a very diverse school, but all these kids knew each other. They all grew up together.
Yeah.
So my 12th grade year was horrible. I didn't tell anybody.
Your what grade year?
Sorry, my 12th grade. That was
I'm
actually the
like,
best
I
year.
already knew you then.
My 7th grade
Your
year
seventh grade year. Mm-hmm.
was horrible. And I didn't tell anybody because unlike your family, we didn't discuss stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of just kept things in. Right around 8th grade in Riverside, gangs started to form. There was a movie called Colors that came out, and it came out prior to that, but it really opened our eyes to Crips and Bloods and the gang life and things like that. At that time, Riverside was being divided to a Crip area and a Blood area, and I remember being in 8th grade and this guy who was supposed to be in 10th grade, he was built like The Rock and he was like 14 years old. He comes up to me and he's like, "What set you claiming blood?" And I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah. I still don't know what that means, but go ahead.
Yeah. Look it up. So, so I started having to deal with that and knowing that I didn't want to be in a gang, knowing that that wasn't the lifestyle I wanted to lead, but also having to claim something. I had to claim some type of gang just not to get beat up at that time. So again, didn't tell anyone in my family this was happening.
Why
I
do you think that is? Why do you think you just didn't know to, or did you just not want to worry them?
I didn't know to. I think when you're a child, you're going to do what you know.
Mm-hmm.
So in your family, you saw your mom talking to your dad, your mom talked to you, you guys talked to each other. So that's what you knew. In my family, we didn't talk about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know that I should have been telling somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and later on, okay,
Spoiler alert. This is why we're talking about this now,
yes,
because this
it
what am I
seeped its way
seeped
into
into
our
our
marriage.
marriage.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
So I just kept this to myself. I kept the struggle to myself. And I found myself getting sent to the quiet room in 8th grade.
Mm.
So the quiet room was a room that they would stick you in. You were not allowed to do homework. You were not allowed to draw. You couldn't do any
What
schoolwork.
sense does this make?
Yeah.
The 80s were brutal
Yes.
on kids.
So I literally sat in that room from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3 p.m. when I got out of school. For lunchtime, I went to lunch 30 minutes before the other kids, so I didn't see anybody. And I had to bring my lunch back to that room, and I got stuck in there. So that quiet room was designed for you to only be there for a couple of days. But because of the way my mom worked, she didn't get home till 7 o'clock at night. She needed to come to the school during the day, but she couldn't afford to miss a day of work.
Yeah,
So I was stuck in the quiet room for over a month.
it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So I started getting myself locked in the bathroom in between periods because I just didn't want to be there anymore. And I really felt like I was never going to get out. So my mom had been threatening me since I was in 6th grade that if I didn't straighten up, I was going to go live with my uncle in this far, far away city where nobody lives and it's
Tumbleweeds are blowing.
country. Yes.
That's what you pictured. You pictured Santa Cruz like.
Yes, like my address would be 1.
Well, I don't even think it was called. We called it.
It's just called
Canyon Country.
Canyon Country.
Yeah,
Yes.
Canyon Country.
So my mom said to me during this time, she says, if you have any F's on your report card, you're going to have to go live with your uncle out there. And I was like, there's no way I am ever going to live out there in that country. So because I was in the quiet room, I wasn't getting any of my schoolwork. Not that I wasn't getting it done. I wasn't getting any of my schoolwork because I wasn't going to any of my classes. So halfway through 8th grade, my report.
It kills me that there wasn't a teacher or anyone that talked to you during this quiet room. Because I think the quiet room, because we've talked about it, I know about it. we've talked about it since I basically met you. It was very traumatic till this day.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of reinforced your silence, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
because you were forced not to speak,
Not to do anything.
which is just crazy.
Yeah. I get my report card, 5 Fs. Somehow I got a D in PE.
Mm.
Don't know. 5 Fs. So my mom sees it. She's like, okay, so you're going to have to go live with your uncle out in Canyon Country. So I'm not taking her seriously because it's been, 3 years since she's been threatening me with this. And we drive up to Canyon Country. We go to my uncle's house, and my uncle comes out and sees me, and he says, "Tomorrow morning, you're cutting the grass and you're washing my car." And I said, "Okay, but after tomorrow morning, I won't be here anymore." So I'm thinking in my head, say what you got to say. I'm going home with my mom,
Yeah.
So, and I'm sorry, and that was actually a Saturday that we arrived. So it was Sunday that he was saying I need to do these things. So my mom comes into where I was sleeping Monday morning, early Monday morning, and she says, "Bye, son," and she gives me a kiss on the cheek. And it's about 5 in the morning, and I wake up and I go, well, what are you doing? And she's like, "I'm going to work." And I said, "Oh, okay. So you're gonna come back to get me?" And she says, "No, this is where you're gonna live, and you only have to live here for 6 months. And if your grades are good, at the end of the eighth grade, you can come back. You can come back home." So I was like, "Mom, please, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't."
I cannot imagine how hard that was for her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and at the time, I didn't. At the time, I felt like she was being selfish.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't doing this for me; she was doing this for her, so she wouldn't have to deal with me. But I think she thought I needed a man in my life,
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you, my mom was all the man I needed.
Mm.
She just she just wasn't able to be around. So,
Wow, this is tough.
all right. So she left, and she didn't come back. And I started doing work for my uncle around the house, cutting the grass and washing his car and all these things. And he was he was automatically mad at me. He I felt he automatically didn't like me as well because, my grandfather, and that's my grandfather's son.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing with my father, he never liked my father. So,
But nobody ever told you why they hated your father. Like,
no,
you never knew.
now it's time to go to school. So I come from a school that was very diverse. It was about 50, I'd say about 50, 60% minority, and the other 40, 50% were Caucasian. So it was a very diverse school. I didn't stand out much as an athlete when I did
You
stuff.
come to Canyon Country. In what year? What year was this?
So I came to Canyon Country in 1988. So
No, you didn't.
yeah, 80,
No, because we met.
87, 87. No,
We only met 2 years after you
yeah,
lived here. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it was 87.
Okay.
And just to give you kind of an idea of my uncle's parenting and things that he didn't know, my uncle was in his 40s when I moved in with him. He was like,
He's also a
he's also a therapist, psychologist,
therapist.
yes.
Hmm.
Him and I have a very good relationship now,
Hmm.
just so everyone knows.
Yes.
But we had a really rough start.
He has taken care of us.
Yes,
Hmm.
but we had a really rough start.
Hmm.
So my uncle says, "You got school tomorrow. There's a bus somewhere, and take that bus to your school." So me, not asking questions, I get dressed. I had a little afro at the time, and I didn't have a comb or anything, so I used a fork to pick my hair out and make it look as nice as
My
I could.
gosh.
And
He didn't give you a comb?
no, I wore a white t-shirt and jeans because I thought Canyon Country, these are cowboys out here. I'm black.
I did not know
I need
this.
to blend in, so I wore a white t-shirt and jeans, and I walk outside, and I see my neighbor, who ended up being a really good friend of mine. I see her walking down the street, so I was like, I guess I should follow her. So I followed her, and I hop on the bus, and what do I see but a sea of whiteness? It was pleasure and pain at the same time.
Why was it pleasure
It
and
was
pain?
pleasure because white is right.
Uh,
This is how I was raised in
yeah.
Riverside, and I was like, I get to be around all these white people all the time.
Yeah.
You know
Like
what I
you
mean?
felt like you were, did you feel like you were in a good neighborhood or you were in
Yeah,
a good place? Okay.
I felt like I was in a better
Yeah.
place. I
Because we
knew,
were always told if there's white people, well, for me, it was Americans. If you can see Americans
then
in a neighborhood, then you're safe, then
yeah,
you're
and that's
good. I know
and
this probably sounds very bad, but if you know,
as mentioned, honest and
we are
open.
being honest and open.
Yes,
This is how we are raised. We are not embellishing anything. This is
yeah.
how we were raised and what we were taught.
So I get on the bus and it's all white, and I get to this school, my middle school, and I go to the office, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna have somebody walk you around." So this black kid shows up to walk me around. I was like, "Oh, okay. So there are other black kids here." So him and I start walking around, and he's showing me everything, and I quickly realize him and I are the only two black kids in the whole entire
Really?
seventh and eighth grade. So we had a couple mixed kids that were there. One of them, Timberly, I'm still friends with to this day. But there was a couple mixed kids that were there, but everyone else was white.
Hmm.
So I remember,
And Hispanics.
I'm sorry, and
Yeah.
yeah, there was
Hmm.
not many,
Yeah,
but
not many,
there
but
was
yeah.
some. So I remember on my first day, I had to run the mile. Okay. So keeping in mind, coming from Riverside, where it was 50% minority, to coming here was like half a percent.
Hmm.
I ran this mile and I beat everybody in the fastest guy in the school. I beat him by a minute.
Oh my
And yeah, which I could not believe. And I instantly became like this
God.
superhero.
Hmm.
And people embraced my blackness for the wrong reasons.
Hmm.
But it felt good. You know, it
Yeah.
felt good to finally get some positive attention and positive feedback, and I started feeling really good about being there. And it's crazy to think, as a kid, all you really need is some motivation, someone positive speaking influence into your
Hmm.
life to really change the trajectory and change the attitude that you have.
Yeah. Wow.
And my attitude switched, and I
Hmm.
knew within a week I didn't want to go back home.
Hmm.
So we're going to fast forward
That
to,
is crazy. You went from mom, where are you going to like, okay, I'm good here. I'm
yeah,
happy.
like this, I'm gonna be successful.
Mm,
You know, I'm like,
wow.
this is how I felt, and that was just feedback from just the kids I was hanging around with. So
Hmm.
fast forwarding to high school, where there was about 12 of us when I got to about 12 black kids when I
Wait,
got
real
to.
quick. So, how were your grades? How did you start? Did you start improving? Because your mom said 6 months.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Hmm.
I had straight A's.
Mm,
So at the end of my eighth grade, I had straight A's. My mom called me and she was like, "Good job. I'm so proud of you. You can come home."
hmm.
I said, "Mom, I love you, but I don't want to come home yet. Let me just do ninth grade out here. Let me
Wow.
just do one more year out here." She checked with my uncle. My uncle said it's fine. So I start high school. There's about 12 black kids there. And in that time, um, there was still a lot of racism.
Hmm.
Okay. And I dealt with a lot of racism at that high school because there was only 12 of us. Just something as simple as 12 of us standing in a circle talking. We called them narcs at the time. They
Hmm.
would come and tell us, "Hey, we can't."
Campus supervisors.
Campus supervisor, we weren't allowed to stand in a circle because we looked too much like a gang.
Hmm.
And we would say, "But those white kids over there are standing in a circle," and they would just tell us, "Don't worry about them." We also, during the winter, we would go to 7-Eleven and we get these gloves. We called them brownies, but they were just garden gloves that we could get for $1 because we just didn't have gloves. And they would told us, "You can't wear those to school because they're gang related." So, um,
So, your hands have to freeze
so your hands have to freeze. So,
or put them in your pockets.
and so anyhow, high school was mixed emotions. I continued to do really well in school with my grades.
Sports.
I started to excel in sports. However, I still had my daddy issues.
Hmm.
I'm still a teenager, not having a father in my life and having my uncle who is on his own journey. He's a single man, he's a therapist. He's on his own journey. I have separation issues because of my mom who decided to um, kick me out, so to speak.
Hmm.
And I had abandonment issues as well. And then when I was 16 years old, my mom gets into a horrible, horrible car accident.
Hmm.
She almost died in this car accident. And she was in a coma. I cannot remember how long she was in a coma for, but it was a few months that she was in a coma. And when she came out of this coma, she could only blink for a very long time. And she ended up being paralyzed completely on the left side of her body and mostly on the right side of her body for the remainder of her life. I'm so sad for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with that. And then a show called The Cosby Show starts. And then there's Cliff Huxtable, not Bill Cosby,
Yeah.
but Cliff
We're
Huxtable.
just talking about Cliff Huxtable, you
Yes.
guys.
And that's the dad.
I
That's
know.
the
I
dad.
know it.
He's a doctor.
Yeah.
He's black. He's successful. He's got 5 kids and he's raising his kids and he has a wife that's successful.
He's an
And
attorney.
he's an attorney. No, she was an attorney. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
she
what I
was an
said.
attorney.
He
Yeah.
was an attorney.
And that was the dad.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have my dad that I can be.
Yeah.
A successful black man. That's what I got to be. But R&B music started. And there were songs like Bump and Grind and Let Me Lick You Up and Down.
Yeah,
And
Bump and Grind came later. Freak Me.
yeah, and we're not going to talk about no Bump and Grind stuff. But,
Yeah, let's not talk about
but
that.
all of those songs that convinced you as a young black man
Mm-hmm.
that in order to be good
Mm-hmm.
and cool and desired, you had to be a player.
Yeah.
So my boys, and I did the same to them. We give each other's props based on how many girls liked us and how many girls we could get to
Mm-hmm.
like us and how many dates we could go on. And so that was ingrained in me. So
And you also had no father figure to talk. You had no adult male to talk to about all of these things you were feeling about women. So you didn't have another voice, the moral voice telling you,
yes,
this is not how you treat women. And you didn't have anybody to see, to witness how they treated a woman.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. I had no one that I could really look up to show me
Mm-hmm.
this is what a woman should mean to you. This is how you should treat a woman. And instead, I had my friends who were just as messed up as I was,
Mm-hmm.
and we're encouraging each other to do the wrong things. You take this boy whose father left him at 3 years old,
Mm-hmm.
who was raised without a father, who saw his siblings have their father in their life because they were valuable to him, to my mom kicking me out at 12 years old to live with my uncle, to feeling like my grandparents couldn't stand me, my uncle didn't like me, to feeling like a big chunk of my family just thought I was a loser and a horrible person, and then learning that being a player is what gets me praise and being a
Mm-hmm.
player is what gets me liked.
Yeah.
And I took all of that garbage and I brought it into our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1989, I walked into Magic Mountain.
Was it 89?
It was
Was it
1989,
the summer of 89 or 88?
summer of 89.
Okay. I did not realize it was the same year. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And if you lived anywhere in Saugus or Canyon Country or Hart, you went to Magic Mountain because it was closed. There was a club called After Hours that I was not aware of. And my friend and I had been there all day because you went to Magic Mountain to look for girls. That's what we did. And we had been there all day. I'd seen a lot of girls that day and I had a good time and we rode some rides. And then on the way out, I hear this music and I look over and I see this girl standing in front of this doorway. And I am telling you, without exaggerating, she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And in the darkness of the night of Magic Mountain, there was a light that appeared to come from the heavens and shine on her. And I was instantly floored. And it was like a glimpse of what my life could be.
I've heard this story so many times, and for some reason, as you're telling it, it's getting me emotional.
My friend is telling me, we got to go, we got to go. So I'm like, but that girl, like that girl. And we left. And I just could not get this girl out of my head. Like, I thought about her night and day. And I'd seen so many girls that day, but this one particular girl, I just couldn't get out of my head. So a couple months later, I'm at school. It's the beginning of school. And I'm sitting in the parking lot after the first day of school. And I see that girl in the parking lot. And my heart exploded. She's walking towards me. And she comes right up to me when I'm sitting in the stairs. And she says, "Hey." And I look at her and our eyes meet. And I was like, "I love you."
Oh my gosh. I remember this. It's so weird. I mean, he didn't actually say I love you,
But
but I remember.
my eyes did.
Yeah, I remember this
And she says, "Does my hair look okay?"
because that's all I cared about.
Yes. And I said, "Oh, yeah, your hair looks really good."
And it's so crazy because my friend had cut my hair. You know, we did that to each other back in the day.
Yes.
She cut my hair and I was so self-conscious. I felt ugly. Like I felt like I looked so bad. And I just saw the first guy walking up the stairs, or he was walking down the stairs.
No, I was
walking
sitting.
up.
I was sitting
Oh,
on the
you were
stairs.
sitting. I just asked you because it was a random person. I didn't know who you were or anything. So
Yeah.
I think that's funny.
And if you haven't guessed it, that girl was her. It was Vanessa.
I was telling a story about being a bully. We'll get into all that later too. And for some reason, I told the story of when Lyndan first saw me. And I had been hearing that story since the day we met. I'd been hearing that story. And then it came to me when he said that there was a light over me. Because as if you heard my story, you know, I was in such a dark, dark place. That was like, right. That was the beginning of, of everything
It was
for me.
after you lost your
As
father.
after I lost my father, I actually started smoking cigarettes then. And I think I'd already started drinking and things just, you know, I thought I was having a fun life, but there was just a darkness in my life. And the fact that he saw a light over me, I think that's what gets me emotional because it just shows that God was there in that moment, you know?
Yeah. It's amazing that God is always with us.
Mhm.
In that moment, God showed me my future. Seeing your face gave me hope.
Yeah.
You know.
Hun. Oh my gosh.
So,
That's why we're not videoing.
yeah. So, in a very dark time in both of our lives, God said these fools need each other.
Yeah.
And we didn't do things the right way.
Yes.
And because of that, we went through a lot of pain and hurt, but we walked through it together. And listening to Vanessa's story and my story, us coming together with all of this baggage that we never unpacked.
Oof. No.
And we said, "I do."
There was no premarital counseling for us. There was no, I hear these marriages and I'm like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do premarital counseling.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, like, you know, when families meet each other, nothing. I mean, it's just, yeah, we're two broken kids, really.
Yeah. So that's a short version of both of our stories. There's so much more. Just like I'm sure with your story, there's so much more, but we're not going to keep you here for hours and hours at a time.
Yeah.
But that's my background. You've heard Vanessa's background. If you haven't, again, go back and listen to it. And then you get to hear what happened when these two people got together.
These two people went,
oh, Vanessa, I have a spoiler for you.
What?
I had a girlfriend.
Oh, gosh.
The day that I was sitting on the stairs and I saw you, I had a girlfriend.
Yeah, I know, fool. I know he had a girlfriend. And I knew the girlfriend.
That's a story for another day.
That's what we're going to share next time? Probably. Yeah. 5 is going to be the doozy. 5, there's probably going to be a part 1 and 2. I did not think that was going to be that tough, but that was a tough one. But I'm proud of us. I heard some things that I've never heard before. It's just beautiful how long you can be married and still discover new things about each other. And
can you say that again?
It's what? Now I already forgot.
You said it's beautiful how long you can be married and still discover things about each other.
We do want to ask you, it's so important because we are new on all these platforms that you would rate and review us. Only if you're going to rate 5-star. If you're not going to rate us 5-star, please move along. And it would just help us so much.
Yes,
so I appreciate, we're already getting DMs, which is so exciting.
Yes.
We're so excited. We are pouring out our heart to all of you. And we hope that you can benefit from this.
Yeah. Follow, subscribe, all that good stuff.
Yeah. You have to follow on iTunes now.
Okay.
You don't subscribe.
Well, whatever it is.
Okay.
Questions, comments, you can send them to remixyourmarriage@gmail.com. Remixyourmarriage@gmail.com. We love questions and we will get back to you all.
Yes, and topics. Well, once we get through a story, we're going to get more into topics and things like that. All right.
Thank you, guys.
I'm proud of you, love. That was tough.
It was very tough. But
by the way, spoiler alert, This man, how many times are we going to say spoiler alert? That's going to annoy me.
Spoiler alert, we're going to say it a lot.
I don't want to say that anymore.
All right, we'll cut it out.
Anyways, spoiler alert. This man can now share his emotions and tell me how he's feeling. And he does not have a problem with that anymore. And I'm so proud of him. Love you guys. Thank you so much.
Yes. Love hard, remix your marriage. See you next time.
Is that going to be our sign off?
It'll be different.
Okay.